So I read Grace Lordan's book, Think Big, Take Small Steps and Build the Future That You Want. And Grace Lordan is a behavioral scientist. She has some really cool behavioral science ideas in here that I'm going to use to help me build the future that I want, be more productive with my time and make better decisions. There's going to be quite a few cool things in this video. So here's a list of them here if you want to jump around because you know what some of them are already about. But otherwise, let's get into it. The first thing that I actually like about the book is just the title and the tagline, Take Small Steps and Build the Future That You Want. I think it's such a nice idea, like building the future that you want. You don't have to just like have the life you want suddenly. Like none of us really are born with like the perfect setup or just have immediately everything that we want. We can just take small steps in the right direction and build it. There's a concept that she talks about in the book called Me Plus, which is where you imagine yourself in the future, a sort of better plus version of me. One of the reasons why this is effective to imagine a future self is because we often look back and see how much we have changed, but we don't look forwards and think that we can change. This is just human nature and it's completely fine, but we just have to recognize that we can change and we can imagine ourselves in the future, a person that we want to be, living a life more of what we want, a life that we want to live more, and we can just take steps in that direction. The Tiara Syndrome. So this is where if you put loads of work into something and you produce something good, or you think what you've done is good, that you feel like someone should just come along and put a tiara on your head for the good work that you've done. And I know I massively relate to this. Like I work as a management consultant and in the office, I often just think when I've done a good piece of work that if no one says like, well done, Tintin, or like great piece of work, then I sort of feel a little bit less valuable. Whenever we do something good or whenever we think we've done something good, we just want people to come along and like pat us on the back and put a tiara on our head. But we have to recognize that everyone else also is living with this syndrome. Everyone else just wants people to come along and put a tiara on their head as well. So you might not always get the tiara when you're working really hard, but that doesn't take away from the fact that if you work really hard, you're still providing value. Confirmation bias. So Grace talks about in the book that confirmation bias is basically where you look for things to confirm the narratives that you already have or the beliefs that you already have. So if you're like an investor, for example, and you think a company is going, their stock price is going to increase, you will look for things that will confirm that point of view. This is, you know, you might not if you're a very good investor, but this is like our general human nature is that we look for things that will confirm our current beliefs. I, for example, when I'm at work, if I'm feeling like insecure about a piece of work that I've done or just like my position, I'll look for pieces of information that will confirm that other people will think less of me. In the same way, I'll do the opposite. If I'm like performing really well or thinking like I'm doing a good job, I will look for evidence that I am doing well that confirm my belief. We're human, it's completely fine. You just have to be aware that your instinct is to confirm the beliefs you already have. The curse of knowledge. This sounds a bit pretentious, but the idea is that when we've been doing something for long enough, we often forget what it is like to be a beginner at that thing. Or if you've known something for long enough, you forget what it's like to not know that thing. This can be summed up as what is very obvious to you might be amazing to others. And this is something I keep in mind a lot when I'm making YouTube videos or writing my email newsletter, link in bio if you want to sign up, is that I feel like a lot of the things that I'm saying are quite obvious, but it's because I think about them a lot or I read about them a lot. Actually, to someone watching this video, you might find it very interesting what I'm saying or very like a new idea that you hadn't thought of before. So I'm not saying I am cursed with knowledge. I am just saying that everyone has this. Everyone has things that they are obvious to them, but might be amazing to others. The Ostrich Effect. So this is where you stick your head in the ground like an ostrich and ignore feedback from the world around you. An example of this is like at university, I was at UCL, and when I was writing essays there, I quite often got feedback on my essays that was to be more concise and include more examples. And I kind of didn't really listen to it because I thought, well, no, I slightly disagree. I like my essays the way that they're written, and that kind of held me back because I just like put my head in the ground and kind of closed myself off to it. There's someone who's giving me very useful information, very helpful feedback that I can implement to improve my essays and improve my score at university, but I kind of have my head in the ground. The Pygmalion Effect. So this is where higher expectations of someone leads to higher performance and lower expectations of someone leads to lower performance. So for example, if you have really high self-belief, you have a lot, like very high expectations of yourself, you will perform better. Or if you have like a teacher in a class who really, really believes in you and your ability, then you will perform better than a teacher who does not believe in you and thinks very little of your ability. This is really important because it relates to both the people that you have around you and also the conversations that you have with yourself. So if you have people around you who believe in you and have high expectations of you because they think that you can do it, then you will raise your performance to meet that level. And it's important about the conversations you have with yourself, because if you believe in yourself and you have high expectations, then you're more likely to perform better. And if you have low expectations of yourself and low self-belief, then you're more likely to fall to that level. It's a fine line with expectations and pressure, because you don't want to put on too much pressure or have too high expectations. Because at school, I felt like I had quite high expectations from my teachers and my parents to perform well, and it definitely made me do well at school. But at times it felt like the pressure was too much, and it got to me, and like, you know, you just get really, really stressed out about studying. So it's about managing the line between raising performance and just being stressed out. It's just something to be aware of, that if there are loads of people around you not believing in you, then you'll probably end up lowering your performance. So who you surround yourself with is super, super important. The sunk cost fallacy. So sunk cost is a cost that has been incurred already and cannot be recovered. So if, for example, I spent 3 years at university studying law, but I didn't want to be a lawyer, then my sunk cost would be the 3 years of law, both in time, 3 years, and money. If you're in the UK, £9,000 a year. Even though sunk costs are relevant in terms of like our learning and our experience during the actual time that we spent doing that thing, like the 3 years of law, we shouldn't consider the 3 years of law as part of our decision about the future, in the sense that like, oh, I spent 3 years studying law, I should just go on and be a lawyer, even though you don't want to be a lawyer. It's very human to think that way, but we shouldn't consider sunk costs when we're making future decisions, because the history doesn't make any difference to the future. If, for example, I bought a ticket to go to the cinema, so the cost has already been incurred, but then on the day of going to the cinema, I can't go for whatever reason, I feel the need to still make use of that ticket, even though the cost has already been incurred. But it makes no difference or not, because the cost has already been paid. You cannot get it back. So we shouldn't make decisions about the future based on sunk cost. That is the sunk cost fallacy. The general advice to work around this is to just make decisions about the future based on like current information, rather than being influenced by any previous costs incurred. But we are only human. It is very difficult to just ignore time spent or money spent doing something. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. Luck, ignorance, bias. So Grace doesn't actually have a name for this in the book, so I came up with luck, ignorance, bias, which is a pretty terrible name. But the idea is that we judge our progress by outcomes, not by the quality of the decisions that we made. For example, if we were studying for an exam and there were some essay questions and we chose to only revise a few essay questions, which is a bit risky because they might not come up, but then they do come up in the exam and the outcome is really good, we get a good result, then we're just happy to have done well. This is important because when we look back on our lives, we often judge our lives by outcomes, but luck is often a huge factor in those outcomes. So we should instead look back on our lives in terms of the quality of the decisions that we made to get there, or to make progress, and that way we can make better quality decisions in the future and rely on luck less. Luck is a huge part of the human experience, but we can try and like eradicate luck as much as possible if we make good quality decisions, or we try and like maximize our luck effectively. The spotlight effect. So this is quite a well-known thing. This is basically where you feel like the spotlight is always on you and everyone is always thinking about you. Like when you're walking down the street listening to Coldplay, which I do all the time, then you feel like everyone's looking at you and just thinking you're a legend, when really no one gives a and you're just kind of walking along the street thinking about yourself. I also feel it at work. For example, like I'm at my desk and I feel like everyone's looking at my screen, and no one's looking at my screen, everyone's just looking at their own screen and doing their own thing. Everyone has the spotlight on them and everyone feels like everyone is thinking about them or cares about them, but actually everyone's just thinking about themselves. So you can remember that if you are putting yourself out there, or you're just like concerned about what people are thinking about you, it's most likely that people are just thinking about themselves and not really thinking about you. Sad thing that people don't care that much, but that is life. I mean, I felt this massively when I started making YouTube videos. I was like, oh my God, every single person in the world is gonna know that I'm making YouTube videos and like watch them and judge me. But yeah, even if they do, they sort of quickly return to thinking about their own lives, and it's just not that big a deal. Final one is omission bias versus action bias. So omission bias is when we omit something, doing something, i.e. we don't do it, then we feel like we're taking less of a risk than doing it. The opposite is action bias, which is where we feel like the default should always be to act. Like nothing ventured, nothing gained is kind of the way to summarize it. We always feel like taking action is the better course of action, if that makes sense. For example, if you were thinking like, should I quit my job? Omission bias would be thinking, no, it's less of a risk to omit the thing, but action bias would just be like, yeah, gotta quit, gotta move on to the next thing. Like there's two sides of the spectrum, it's just like which side which way are you biased? Which bias do you have? However, research suggests that humans feel more regret about not doing things, i.e. omitting things, than they do about taking action. So generally, as a general rule, we should lean towards action much more than we should not doing the thing. And this, obviously, Grace is talking about like careers and building a life that you want. So she's not talking about like robbing a bank. It's obviously not better to act when you think of having the idea of robbing a bank. You should obviously not do that thing. But when you're talking about like, should I quit my job, or should I like apply for this job, or should I learn this skill, excuse me, should I learn this skill, then you generally should take action instead of not doing the thing. If you are struggling with knowing what life to build, as Grace says, then you should watch this video here about how I'm figuring out what to do with my life, and also this video here about how I stay on top of my life, the Sunday night review. But otherwise, I hope you got some value from the video and enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you did. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.